I'm just letting you know that we're going to get started in a couple minutes here. We're about to get here. My name is, once again, Paris Prokopis. I'm an account manager here at MIG. And welcome to our not-for-profit fiscal year-end closing procedures. Also joining me in the presentation will be Faye Reynolds. She's one of our consultants here. But before we begin, we have some housekeeping items to take care of. First of all, you can choose to listen through your mic and your speakers, and you can use your computer speakers and voice over IP, or you can also use a telephone to dial. You just dial in using the information that's provided. If you have questions, submit questions via the questions panel and any comments that you may have. We will have time for some questions and answers after the presentation. So you can send them throughout the presentation, though. And if something happens to be really relevant to what's being shown, we may interrupt and ask that question at that point. Just depends. Real quick agenda for us. We're going to talk a little bit about MIG and who we are. Then we're going to get right into discussing the non-for-profit year-end close. We will be going over these items: year-end checklist, year-end closing lists, module closing procedures, analytical accounting, finalizing year-end closing. And then Faye will show you a live demo, show you some troubleshooting and year-end closing procedures, and then finally we'll end with our question and answer period. So let's get started. A little bit about MIG first. MIG specializes in the implementation of financial and business management systems. We work to help our customers streamline their processes and maximize their productivity. Our specialties are Microsoft Dynamics GP, SL, CRM, SharePoint, and business intelligence. And MIG has been in the business well over 15 years now. And we're mainly focused from mid-market to enterprise-level customers. And now, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Faye Reynolds. Faye, take it away.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to our not-for-profit year-end close. My objective is that by the end of this presentation, you'll be able to complete your fiscal year-end close with no problems. There's a checklist that we have that they go through so that you can make sure this year-end close will work without any difficulties. First, you want to finalize any and all of your applicable transactions for the final period of your year that's going to be closed, which would be the last month of your fiscal year. Next, you're going to want to reconcile any of your submodules to the general ledger. This is really important if you have any journal entries that have been posted directly to accounts receivable, accounts payable, etc., to make sure that the GL accounts balances match the balances in receivables and payables. It will also help you to notify if there's any problems with any posting for transactions that didn't post and complete correctly. Next, you're going to want to make sure that you print any of your necessary reports, trial balances, aging reports from within general ledger, and financial statements, your balance sheet, income statement, etc. You would want to be printing these both within Great Plains and within FRX or Management Reporter, whichever you are using. Probably the most critical step in making sure that your year-end close will go easily is to make a backup. You should make your backup before you start the closing procedures, and then make another backup as soon as the closing process is complete. You should not post any transactions while you're in the middle of the closing. And you should not post any transactions after you have made that first backup before the closing starts, because if something happens and you have to restore your backup, you don't want to have to worry about also redoing any journal entries at that point. You can perform your backup from within Great Plains if you are on your server, or You can use your SQL Management Reporter to actually do the backup and save it to whatever location you want. I strongly recommend that any of the backups done for the closing be put into a separate folder and be named so that you know that this is the before closing backup with the date or the after closing backup with the date, and put them possibly in a folder that says this is for the fiscal year-end close backups so that they can be easily found and you can keep track of them. They don't get accidentally deleted before everything has been double-checked and made sure that all of your processes have gone correctly. You could have MIG, your IT department, or whoever is providing your external IT provider that maintains your network to run these backups. And then you start the year-end closing process. Make sure before you start this closing process that you have enough hard drive space. Since your current tables are copied as temporaries while the closing is going on, it is recommended that you actually have enough space to at least double your current tables in SQL, so that if your databases are 2 gigs, you want to make sure you have 2 gigs free when you do the closing. I would recommend actually having more because you don't want to accidentally run out of space. And if you're down to that limit, it's time to start looking into upgrading your hard drive anyway, or at least cleaning out some of your hard drive. So, but you want to have at least double your company database at all possible. Okay, there are some myths that a lot of people have believed about year-end closing for the general and GP, and some of these used to be true. They are not anymore. One is the fact that a lot of people think that they have to wait until all of the adjusting entries have been entered and posted before they can close the general ledger. And this is false. You can actually go into your most recently closed year and post to history. After you've posted to the history, your GP will actually do a mini close then that will roll any profit and loss account amounts into retained earnings and adjust balance forward amounts for your balance sheet amounts. You only need to make sure that your last historical year is completely posted before you do your closing. For example, if we're getting ready to close 2014, you're going to want to make sure that 2013 has been completely, all the adjusting entries have been entered and posted, because you can only go back one historical year to the your prior year. Anything older than that cannot be posted to. Another thing people will have called saying that I'm running my general ledger year-end close and it's stuck. Actually, it probably is not stuck. It can sometimes take up to or over half an hour to close your general ledger, and you may not think anything is happening, but it's happening behind the scenes. If you were to stop it, then you end up with problems and having to restore backups and restart, because you'll end up with a partially closed year. Basically, if you think it's stuck, just be patient. Next, a lot of people think that your fixed asset year-end close is so easy. All you have to do is change the year on the book. And really, no, this is not all that you do. You actually need to close your fixed asset module in the first period of your new year before you calculate depreciation for that period. If you wait and are you doing an annualized depreciation, your module could end up trying to play catch-up for the periods that had passed before the close, so that you could end up with a month that has a huge amount of depreciation simply because it's depreciating for 3 months instead of 1 month. And I will go through the process and the steps for closing your fixed assets for the year. Another myth is that you can close your receivables and payables whenever you get around to it. Well, while you're closing, receivable management and payable management does not affect your general ledger, there are some year-to-date and life-to-date buckets. If you're using your summary fields functionality, it is critical to close in your first period. This way your summary fields will, for year-to-date, life-to-date, will show correctly. If you don't close in that first period, those fields can be corrected by running a detailed smart list report of all the transactions for your current year and then adjusting your summary fields amount. The receivables, payables, remember you do need to close for the 1099s as soon as possible, whenever necessary, which is usually before you actually go in and start posting. Okay, our module closing order. This is the order in which your modules should always be closed. If you are not using one of these modules, you can, of course, skip that module before you and then go on to the next one. But the first module to be closed should be your receivables management, and this should be closed in your first week of your new year after all of the period end processes have been run, such as aging and reports. Assuming that your calendar year was closed correctly in January for the first week of your new fiscal year, when you do the closing for receivables management and or payables management, you would actually only close for the fiscal year only. Payables management as well should also only be closed in that first week to make sure your buckets stay accurate without having to go in and fix them. Fixed assets, you have to close payables before you close fixed assets. This is a must. After closing payables, you would then go in to close your fixed assets, and any of the books that have been run on a fiscal year basis would need to be closed before you calculate depreciation for your new fiscal year, the first period. If you have any books that have been running on a calendar year basis, they should have been closed before calculating the January depreciation. And sometimes what would be on a calendar year would be if you're computing, you use different depreciations calculations for your taxes or for whatever reason. Although if you're closing on a fiscal year, if you're running on a fiscal year, usually your taxes would actually work on the same fiscal. The only times it might be things might be different is if you're running property taxes and things like that. Your payroll should always be closed on a calendar year basis because it doesn't matter what your fiscal year is. IRS is a calendar year for payroll. And before the first pay run of your new calendar year, you would end up, it's when you would actually close payroll. We'll go over this very briefly today. It'll actually be covered in more depth when we do their normal year-end closing. And then finally, you close your general ledger, which does a hard close where your P&L accounts are going to be rolled into retained earnings. Although for not-for-profits, we may call retained earnings account could be called your fund balance or your net asset account. If you're using interfund or a segment to classify funds and you want to roll up into divisional retained earnings, those must be checked in the Analytical Accounting Setup Options window. You could also make sure that you need to make sure that your general ledger setup shows that you want to use any divisional retained earnings accounts to make sure that each division with a P&L has a retained earnings account set up. Analytical accounting will be touched on very briefly because even though it is part of the not-for-profit package, if you're would be a much more in-depth coverage for closing analytical accounting. So let's talk about receivables management. When we're going to close our receivables management, first you want to make sure that you complete any of your monthly processes, including posting all of the non-recurring receivable management batches, printing your aging reports, etc. You want to review any aging reports, and then you would run your receivables management year-end closing process. You would make sure before you run this process, if you have any new transactions, you would want to just save any of the New Year's transactions to batches until after the closing process has been performed. Next would be payables management, and same way that we did it for receivables. First, you want to make sure we've completed all the monthly processes. You would want to make sure that any of your 1099s, as a calendar year, you would be running any 1099 closes at a calendar year for any of your tag vendors before posting any payables into a new calendar year. 1099s can be printed after a close, but these would more than likely have already been taken care of since there's a January 31st deadline for printing and mailing 1099s according to the IRS. Then we would want to run our payables management year-end close process. And there are two closes required. If we're not running on a calendar year, you would have closed your 1099s first for the calendar year, and then you would run a 1099 year-end close process for your fiscal year, which is what we're covering right now. After closing payables management, if you're using fixed assets, this would be the next module that we would close. We would want to make sure, again, we want to close out payables module before we start closing fixed assets. We want to double check that all of the transactions, any additions, retirements, etc. have been posted to fixed assets. Double check that any of the final depreciation routines have been run and that the related general ledger interface processes have been completed. And then we would run the fixed asset year-end closing process. All right. I'm going to touch briefly on payroll. Again, this is something that we will go into more depth when we do towards the end of the calendar year. Year-end processes in payroll are always done as of December 31st. You would confirm the status of any new updates from Microsoft at that time. Process any final payrolls for that are with checks that are printed as of December 31st. You would process your final payroll period and quarter procedures, build your year-end wage files, which will hold all of the very needed information for W-2s and 1099-Rs, review and edit the W-2 and 1099-R information if needed. Then you would print your W-2s, 1099-Rs, apply any new updates for Microsoft Dynamics GP for the tax tables, which would be available via customer source. Downloads. Any new tax tables are normally going to be installed after you've closed your payroll. And then your new calendar year payroll would be ready to be processed. All of this should be done before that first payroll is run in January. All right, next we're going to briefly go over some of the things for analytical accounting. All right, first, analytical accounting is included in your not-for-profit package. It also includes interfund and other modules that are used by many not-for-profit organizations. It will track relatively short things with a relatively short life, works with the grant management module, and tags or codes in analytical accounting will actually mark transactions in addition to the general ledger account numbers. Analytical accounting will transfer when we close it, it will transfer all of your current year analytical data for each account to the account and transaction history. It will consolidate your analytical information for the open year profit and loss accounts and transfers those to the retained earnings account. It'll then consolidate your analytical information for your balance sheet accounts, bringing the balances forward as account beginning balances for your new fiscal year. Zeros in the analytical balance for all the profit it'll zero the analytical balances for all the profit and loss accounts after they've been closed to retained earnings. All the balances of your unit accounts will be brought forward to the new fiscal year, and it'll print you an Analytical Accounting year-end closing report. All right, the year-end close process for Analytical Accounting will consolidates all the analytical data for the alphanumeric transaction dimensions, carries it forward to the next year, and the consolidation is performed only for those transactions that have been marked to be included in the year-end process. If you are running Analytical Accounting, please let us know if you need any further help, because, as I said, this is a much more intense thing, and we're not going to go into that much detail for Analytical Accounting today, right now. Then finalizing your year-end close. Some of the best practices to finalize your year-end close is to first, you want to ensure that no one is logged into Dynamics GP while you're doing your year-end closing process. You would want to check your user activity window to ensure that you are the only person who's been logged into Great Plains while running this year-end close. And it is best to actually be logged in as either SA or DynSA rather than under your normal user's name. All right. Next, for a best practice, second, you want to make backups. You want to always make sure that you have 2 valid backups of all of your companies and the Dynamics database, one before you start the year-end and one after the close, so that this way you'll have backups of each company and that Dynamics system database that's called Dynamics. You want to verify your posting types for all of your accounts. I would recommend running a smart list to use smart list to run a report that would use to verify the posting accounts for all of your GL accounts to make sure all the profit and loss accounts are marked as being profit and loss, all the balance sheet accounts are marked as being balance sheet, so that they will close correctly. You'd want to read the documentation and follow the order of the modules to close, so this would be done correctly. And you want to make sure that you save or print any of your year-end closing reports. Many of these reports I would recommend actually saving them as files, because when you start closing things, and they can actually end up with thousands of pages, especially payables and receivables management, which takes a long time and lots of paper. Saving them as files is much easier. I also recommend when I'm doing the closing that in addition to saving them as files, you print them to a screen as well as for this as an option. So this way, when you see it on the screen and see that it's complete, you know that the file has actually been completed. Some additional items is that before closing your general ledger, you want to create a simple account smart list again and review your posting type settings. If you prefer, you can close your test database first. This way, make sure everything is going to close correctly. As long as your test database is up to date with your current data. And any fiscal period setup maintenance, you're going to want to go into the Tools Setup Company Fiscal Periods. You want to make sure that all of your prior year modules boxes have been closed, and you want to make sure that there's a new calendar for your current year module postings. To reinforce that, again, make sure that your general ledger posting accounts are correct. And then we close our general ledger. All right, general ledger is always going to be the final module to be closed, and it doesn't need to be closed immediately. You want to finalize any of your adjusting entries, post any single-use batches. You want to make sure that you've printed out a detailed trial balance and FRX and any FRX or management reporter financial statements. You want to double check that your posting to history settings have been set up correctly, so that this will allow you to post to your most recent closed fiscal year only, and you want to make sure that you've checked the boxes to maintain history. This way you don't wipe out the history, and you can always go back and use history for your old transactions. You want to make sure that all of your GL accounts are classified by the correct type. In other words, make sure that all of your P&L accounts are marked as being P&L, all the balance sheets are marked as being balance sheet. You want to make a backup. You want to confirm that your retained earnings or fund balance account that has been selected is the correct account showing in your GL setup. And then you would run the GL year-end closing process. And when you're doing this, make sure that you click Close Year button only once. If you click it twice, you could end up closing not only the year that you want to close, but your current year, and that is never a good thing. All right. When you're doing, as I said, you want to make sure that your retained earnings account here in the GL setup is marked correctly, so that is the correct GL account. You can also choose whether or not you're going to start renumbering your journal entries or just let them keep going. Most people choose to let it keep going. It will show you the current year that you're currently in, and at this point, if you wanted to, you could choose to remove any unused segment numbers. Most people do not. When you've clicked that you're going to close the year, you're going to always get a message that tells you that you must you have some consolidate transactions and transfer details and things. Often it'll tell you that you've got some unposted batches. As long as you've gone through and have posted all of your single-use batches, this is normal. You just click OK and ignore it. Okay, and now I'm going to start showing you, give you a live demo. I'm going to be running this live demo in GP 2013. Okay, remember that if you're using grant management and if you have a grant that spans more than 1 year, you might not want to include any of that grant in your year-end close. You want to let it roll forward until its end. And it's very easy to find where your year-end closing windows are. All of your year-end closing windows for every module is under routines. So if I click on financial, and it comes up under routines, you'll see where it has year-end closing. Fixed assets, under routines, we have our year-end. This works for all of your modules. The sales, inventory, under routines has year-end close. This makes it very easy. Again, if you're using analytical accounting and you want to close your divisional accounts, you're going to want to make sure that option is marked in the analytical accounting administrative screen, set up company analytical accounting options, and then mark in general ledger to close your divisional. I have not actually I'm not usually going to be going into very much on the analytical accounting, simply because it is just way too in-depth for this type of presentation. It could take hours all by itself. All right. You can always, as you're going in, we can go in and make sure that our company fiscal periods, which would be under administration, set up company fiscal periods, and you can actually see what years are open. You can go in and look at the past years and actually see how far back they've been closed, which, since this is a sample company, closing doesn't actually happen very often. On this one, 2014, it's still open. When it has been closed, that, remember, that year will have the box marked showing that this is a historical year. Okay, we're going to be closing. Again, the first module we close is receivables management. After running all of our various reports, the trial balance, which would be showing our aging and things, you would then go into sales, routines, year-end close. Our year-end close window will pop up, and you can tell it, if you're running on a calendar year, you would normally just tell it all, and it would close all of them. If you're running on a fiscal year, you would tell it that you're only going to close your fiscal year. You leave it marked showing that you want to print your report. I'm going to show you very briefly what it would look like if you're doing a calendar year. Well, I'm only going to print the screen for. You can see that it would simply show if there was anything there. Then you go back, I'll go in, and you can see where the calendar year had been closed. We want to do just a fiscal year now. Again, leave it to print the report. You tell it to process. It'll ask if you want to continue. You tell it yes. This is where normally I print the screen, but I would also print it as a file. Usually I like to print as tab delimited. I can save it to wherever I want it to be saved. If you have something like a cute PDF or Adobe Writer, something that will actually print and has one of your printers show up as will actually print it as a PDF file, you could actually choose to print to that printer if you have reset your PDF printer as being your default, which would give you a PDF file. If not, doing it here as a delimited, and again, as I said, I like tab delimited files simply because they're easy to open in Excel. And you say OK. And it has just gone through, and even with my little sample company, you can see it was 35 pages. This is why I recommend saving them as files, not printing them on paper. And you can tell that it closed each company, what its year-to-date was, what was last year, life-to-date, any cash that was received, costs, sales amounts, etc. And then it'll print out a year-end close for the salesperson for the fiscal year, so that you know what their commission sales were, what their percentages were, what their total commissions they would have received would have been. And printing it on by territory in addition to, instead of just by salesperson. that you can tell which territories actually did better. If I minimize this, you can, my tab delimited file, open with, well, and I could tell it that I want to open a workbook that is on my desktop. And I'm going to open all files. This way I will see my tab delimited. And because I'm going to be doing it as a delimited, and it's already been set, and it has everything, I'll just simply, yes, it doesn't look as pretty as a tab delimited as it would if it was actually done as a PDF, but it does have the information, and you could go in and clean it up and arrange things if you needed to. All right. After we've closed sales, we go into purchasing. And under purchasing, routines, year-end close. Of course, you can actually use the buttons at the top if you need to go into your various items. However, I simply really, by going into tools, routines, purchasing, year-end close, but I just have always found it easier to actually go in and let it go into the desktop area. And close the calendar year only. It would just show you 1099 amounts. If we close our fiscal year, and I'm just going to do it as a print to screen, it will show each of your vendors the amounts that were billed, payables, the amounts that have been billed to them, the amounts that were paid, if there are any discounts available, if any discounts have been taken, how many invoices for the year, etc. And again, this is one of the reasons you would want to print it to a file, because even this one is, in the sample company, is 15 pages. And you would then actually see when they've been closed. Let me close that. After we've done payables, if you're running inventory and you need to do a close, under inventory, routines, year-end close, you can actually come in and you would process it. You could choose to remove any discontinued items, any sold lot attributes, any sold receipts, cost change histories prior to a date that you can set here. Update your item standard cost, which you might want to this might actually be the only one you do. Most of the time we don't try to, if you just close out these discontinued items, you wouldn't have the history and things for them anymore because they've been taken away. A lot of times, the only times what people will do is the item standard cost. And if you run process, it'll do a very quick closing. This one does not ask you about a report ahead of time. And it doesn't tell you actually when it is finished. It just, because nothing was actually changed. All right. If we've actually done our sales, our purchasing, we can go in and do payables management, which would be under financial routines. You would go down to the fixed assets, your year-end close, and then you can actually choose which of the books that you're actually going to close. You can insert individually or insert them all if you're going to close all of them. Tell them to continue. And if you go back in, you'll see that our year by year changed, so we know that it finished. This is again one of those closings that does not give you a report. You just have to give it some time. And then you would go in and you would actually, you can open it up to make sure it has been closed. You can go into the setup. For your in your book and see what the current fiscal year is for each of the books that we've closed, and it will also show what the current year is. Payroll, as I said, we're not going to really show anything for payroll because this is a fiscal year and payroll is closed on calendar year, but if you were going to close it again, it would be under routine payroll, and then you would process to create the year-end wage file, which closes the year, and that at that point you would go in and you could do your editing of W-2s, 1099-Rs, printing W-2s, 1099-Rs. All right. The last thing, as we have said before, that will be closed is your general ledger. You go into financial routines, year-end closing, and you would want to make sure that you actually do have a retained earnings account. You can click that little arrow and it will show you which account it is to make sure it is routines. Whether or not you're going to have any, if you're going to maintain any inactive accounts or remove unused segment numbers, normally we will do this. Before you actually run the year-end close in here, however, you're going to want to go in and first, under the setup for your general ledger, make sure that it is marked that you want to maintain a history in your accounts and transactions. If you do want to maintain budget transactions in history, you would mark it as well. The button I often will turn off after the closing has been done is I would turn off the posting to history and only turn that on when I'm trying to post to a historical transaction, especially at the beginning of a calendar year if it was closed on a calendar year. But this way it just prevents someone posting accidentally to history that it really shouldn't be going to a history. It should be a current year account, and they mess the dates up. No, this way it can't be done unless you know about it. Okay, and you're doing it that way. You would, after that had been closed, and we've made sure that's done, if you wanted to check your smart list, you would go into the financial and go into your accounts, and it's going to bring up all of right now it's bringing up all of your posting type accounts. And you could simply, if they're set up so that all the balance sheets are together and all the income statement, profit and losses are together, you can simply scroll down and make sure that the last balance sheet is retained earnings, or whatever your final balance sheet is. The profit, everything above that would be your profit and loss. If this is not the way they show up on yours, you could tell it to print just your balance sheet. You can tell it to print just your profit and losses by going into the search and tell it that you want your posting type to be balance sheet only. And it would print just the balance sheets. You could tell it that you wanted it to be profit and loss only. You could tell it that you're going to print, you can give it a range of account numbers if you're going to, so that you can only print the range of account numbers and be able to tell what the posting types would be. This is up to you as to how you're going to actually do it. Remember, if you have more, it gives you a maximum record preset as 1,000. If you have more than 1,000 general ledger accounts, I would recommend that you would want to go ahead and change this so that it would include all of your numbers. But give it some huge amounts, and this way you know that you've included all of them. And when it's finished printing it, it will tell you that it's completed, and it would tell you how many we have. For this test company, there's no problem. In many live companies, there could be thousands of accounts. If you've made any adjustments to how you want to sort, you can actually go into the favorites, and where it's telling you that it's accounts and it has it just the asterisk, you could tell it that this is to be printing your be it balance sheet only, P&L only, year-end checks, year-end account type checklist, whatever you wanted to call it, to make sure that you, and then it would actually show up on your, when you go into the smart list, it would show up under your smart list, under that account, as that new name, so that you could find it easily and have it already preset. Then we go in, after everything has been checked and you've made sure that your accounts are correct, you go into your year-end closing, and you tell it that you want to close the year. And it'll always tell you that there's been a single-use batch or a quick journal transaction has not been posted. Do you want to continue? And this is going to happen if there's any batches sitting out there at all. So after you've already checked to make sure that all of your current year single-use batches and all of your transactions have been posted for the year that you're closing, you would have told it continue. All right. I know that that account is there. And it will end up closing, and when it does close, it will give you a you'll end up getting a closing report that basically it looks like a large journal entry, that it will show all of your P&L accounts. Okay. I had it marked to close to divisional accounts. You don't have any divisional accounts. Since I had no divisional accounts and I was telling it to close to divisional accounts, that's why it was telling me it couldn't find a retained earnings account. As you can see, it's going to take a little bit of time. At least with 2015, it shows you a little bar that shows processes and which steps are completed. Used to, the only thing that you could see to close was this little mouse, little hourglass. And I'm just going to tell it print the screen. And you can see here where it was actually closing for multi-currency, because multi-currency is set up in our test company. And you have the functional amount, the originating amount. And as you can tell, it looks like a large journal entry where sales are going to be debited out. Anything that would normally have a credit balance will have a debit to close a credit balance. It'll have a credit to close a debit balance. And at the very end, debits and credits, of course, should total. If when you have come in and you have closed it and your debits and credits are not totaling, that's when you're going to wanting to go in and double check what went wrong, restoring a backup and redoing it, because this is not something you want to fix. This you can just let go. And you can tell it'll show what the last closing date is as of the end of the fiscal year that was being closed, which since this is a sample company, the closing dates run on a calendar year basis, and that we are currently in our current year that we're in. Okay, so this ends the live demo. Let's go back into and we'll talk about troubleshooting. Right. Often there are some issues. These are some of the normal problems that have come up after a year-end close for the troubleshooting. Things that people have discovered problems and we get called about. First, they'll say that they need to edit. They've had a close and they need to edit an amount in payables management. In general ledger, a lot of the problems that we'll see would be things like we need to reprint a year-end close report. My history transactions got removed. How do I post to a historical year? What can I do to clear my unit accounts? I need to fix a P&L account that did not close. I need to fix a balance sheet account that closed in error. I'm getting a divisional retained earnings error. Or I'm getting a message that's saying while I'm closing that there's another user is posting. And we'll go through some of the various things that we can do about some of the fixes for these next. All right, and for payables, editing amounts since last close. Often this will happen. The problem is that amounts for the vendors since the last close are incorrect. And this could be because transactions from the prior or from the next fiscal year actually got posted before or after the close. It can be resolved by going in to edit the amounts, by going into the summary vendor card. You would enter a vendor, click on the button yearly, and then in the summary window you would select the amount since your last close in the summary view and edit the values. As again, I stated earlier, you would normally get this by printing all of your transactions for the year in Smart List so that you would actually have the amount. Next, another thing is...
Sorry to interrupt. Sorry to interrupt. We have about 5-6 minutes left, and that's it. So,
all right.
So you know time. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Reprinting year-end close reports. Saying that some of the year-end close reports didn't print. Basically, There's no way to reprint a year-end close report. You can go in and print a cross-reference report, but you cannot actually reprint the actual year-end close report unless you saved it as a file. If you needed to do it as a cross-reference, it would be under the reports, financial, cross-reference, and then you would print the year-end close journal entry. Next would be transaction histories got removed, and this would have happened because you didn't mark to maintain your history, and when you closed the year, it wiped it out. The only way to fix it is to restore from a backup. Make sure you make sure that maintain history is marked, and then redo another close of the year. The clearing of your unit accounts, if you needed to zero out any balances, your unit accounts are not closed by your year-end process, and you would complete your year-end close, make a backup, then run a clear unit accounts script against the company database using SQL Management Studio, and then reconcile all the closed and open years in GP are correct, and it gives you a sample of the script. This is usually something that you would call us about, and we would talk to your IT people. All right, posting to a historical year, you would go in and you would make sure that you would check the box that allows posting to a historical year, post the transaction using the historical year's date. It would post, and you'll actually end up posting like two transactions, one that will actually post it and then one that will adjust retained earnings or balance forwards the correct amount. Then after that, you would go in and uncheck your posting to the historical year. Allow posting. Fixing a balance P&L account because the reason is because the posting account was set incorrectly. This is something that you would call us about, and we would have to go in and run scripts and to fix this. The only other way would be if you found it before anything else had been posted and you restore back up, correct the posting type, and then reclose. But if something has been done already, you're going to want to actually call us so that we can run the scripts to fix it. Fixing a balance sheet account, same way. There's scripts that can be done to do it. If it has, if nothing else has been posted since the close and you discover it right away, you could restore back up, correct the type, reclose. Otherwise, you would want to call us so that we can do the scripting to make sure it's correct. The divisional fund balance error, you would want to make sure that the fund balance accounts are set up for each of the various divisions, and that they're marked in, that you're going to correct it so that you will be actually have an account for each of the divisions that you're closing into, and then print, and then run, and then do your close. If there were any stuck records, there is an automated solution that can be downloaded and run. Another user is posting. This would be, you would end up, someone else is logged in. You would go into your SQL Management Studio, run the script to get users out. If someone has just come in, you would go and beat them over the head with a stick and tell them to stay out until you tell them to again, and then if there's a batch that was stuck, you can go in and run a script to correct any batches that had problems and any stuck records. Okay.
Okay. Because for the sake of time, we had a couple of questions. We will let's see what we have here. We've got one question. Since we operate on a fiscal year, sorry, it's cutting out a little bit, so I can't see the whole question. Okay, since we operate in a fiscal year, do we need to close the AP module for the calendar year separately? Is it possible to do this for the year 2014?
You would want to normally close the calendar year as soon as you could because that affects your 1099s. If you don't send out 1099s, close them both. You should go on and close them both at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
The only reason that normally you would close the calendar year right away is when you're sending 1099s. But if your company never sends out a 1099 to people, it doesn't matter, really.
Okay. All right. And then, all right, I will, there are a couple of questions we can answer. Oh, the same person just asked, do we do send out a 1099. Can we still close out the calendar year 2014 in the AP module?
Yes, you can close it. You may want to double check to make sure that your year-to-date information is correct in the year-to-date in the summary so that your 1099s at the end of the year are going to be correct for 2015.
Okay.
And I would strongly recommend at the end of the right after December 31st, when it's and all that you go on and close 2015 calendar year portion of it at that point.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you very much. Okay. That concludes the question and answer period. Those are the only two questions there. Next slide, please. Okay, and just real quick recap, MIG does offer several support plans and gives you the benefit of not only support with Microsoft Dynamics products, but any third-party add-ons as well. And they're fixed rate. You pay once a year instead of having to pay every time you have an incident or what have you. And we also do offer various training options for your company, and contact us and see how we may help you. And even if you need more additional training on this or analytical accounting or anything else, you can reach out to us for that at info@mig.com. And we want to thank you for joining us. Any questions, be sure to refer to info@mig.com, and you can also look at our website at www.mig.com. Thank you very much for attending, and we do these very often, so keep an eye out for other webinars as we come along, and you will be sent out information afterwards as well. Thank you very much, and have a great day.